It was frightening. In Elmira, where I spent most of the time, 13 and a half years, there were 3 or 4 stabbings or cuttings every day. There was violence that did not involve weapons. There was gangs. So there was a general atmosphere that involved, violence and adrenaline that permeated the air.
Good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you so much for being here. I'm Andrea Parc. I'm a mother, author, mindset coach, and mentor.
And I'm Alexa Dumitru, her daughter. I'm a fashion designer based in New York.
And welcome to How I Escaped Prison, a podcast where we share real stories of overcoming mental and emotional barriers. Join us as we explore challenges life throws at us and how we found freedom by escaping the prisons of our own minds. Today, we have a special guest, Mr. Jeffrey Deskovic. He's an attorney, but he has an extraordinary story that for me was incredible. And the inspiration that we can get, all of us, from his life, it's incredible. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Mr. Jeffrey Deskovic.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I think the name of the podcast makes me a most appropriate guest. I've got many forms of prison. You talked kind of about that, prisons of our own making, mental prisons. My story, of course, is going to involve an actual physical prison. I am an attorney. I am the founder of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, which frees wrongfully convicted people and pursues policy changes aimed at preventing wrongful conviction. We've freed 14 people. We've helped to pass 3 laws aimed at preventing wrongful conviction, and another 6 with the National Coalition Group, which we're part of, which I'm an advisory board member of. It could happen to you. I'm on the Global Advisory Council for Restorative Justice International. I have a master's degree in criminal justice. My thesis is written on wrongful conviction causes and reform. And of course, I got into this advocacy work because I was exonerated by DNA testing myself, following 16 years of wrongful incarceration. In brief, I was incarcerated. I was arrested at age 16 for a murder and rape which I did not commit. I lost the trial when I was 17, despite the DNA not matching me. Wrongful conviction, of course, caused by a coerced false confession, prosecutorial misconduct, fraud by the medical examiner, terrible public defender. Lost 7 appeals, got turned down for parole, largely because I maintained my innocence rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility. Ultimately, I was exonerated through further DNA testing through the data bank, which cleared me and identified the actual perpetrator, who was subsequently arrested and convicted. So this is my life now, freeing people in the same position I was, working on the prevention. And so I survived the physical prison. I escaped an actual physical prison. I just did it in a legal way. I didn't go over the wall.
My heart is pounding only hearing your story.
Yeah, I have like goosebumps. And
Yes, and I would, of course, having this podcast would discuss how we escaped the mental prison. And I'm a former attorney in New York, and I was found guilty following a trial of immigration fraud as part of my general practice, and I spent nearly 3 years in federal prison. So I know how physical prison looks like. And I also know that without having the mental strength to go through this, we would not be able to survive. And now my question to you is, what was going through your mind when you knew you were wrongfully convicted and you knew that you will go to prison because of that?
Yeah, so, well, I didn't realize I was going to be found guilty until I was found guilty. Up until that point in time, my way of thinking up until that point in time, and again, I was 16 and I was 17, was I thought only people who committed crimes are convicted. So I was thinking, and then on top of that, my family believed in the system, and many they were all adults, and many of them were saying, you're going to be found not guilty because you're innocent. Don't worry about it. Everything will be okay. So I didn't realize I was going, to be found guilty until I was found guilty, and then I had it in my head between the time I was found guilty and when I was sentenced. I thought, well, I'm going to make verbal appeal to the judge to overturn the conviction. The DNA doesn't match me, and he'll overturn the conviction instead of sentencing me. Except that didn't happen either. I mean, the judge said to me, the judge said, maybe you are innocent. And instead of overturning the conviction, he instead sentenced me to a 15 to life sentence because I had been charged as an adult and tried as an adult, and I was therefore sentenced as an adult and sent to a men's maximum security prison. I remember being really frightened. I remember not knowing, what to expect. It was very dangerous for me because, I was 17 years old and I was sent to a men's maximum security prison. So, they were fully formed adults, many of whom were guilty of very serious violent crimes. How am I going to fight off a grown adult if they attack me? And then I had built-in handicap of knowing if any of them, the prisoners discovered I was incarcerated for a sex offense, that could motivate them to assault me. There's a vigilante mentality towards people in prison. So it definitely was a dangerous experience. It was frightening. In Elmira, where I spent most of the time, 13 and a half years, there were 3 or 4 stabbings or cuttings every day. There was violence that did not involve weapons. There was gangs. So there was a general atmosphere that involved, violence and adrenaline that permeated the air. It was a frightening thing, the idea to be in an environment where the guards rather than civilians were in charge. Because in the county jail, I was in the forensic unit, and that's there's security there, but they're not in charge. The civilians are in charge. But of course, in a prison, it's the other way. It's the other way around. So that prospect was frightening. Many of the guards didn't like people who were incarcerated for sex offenses. Some of them were dangerous. Others were just lazy, which translated into them. Sometimes they look the other way, walk in the opposite direction when violence was occurring to be able to avoid breaking things up. They don't want to file paperwork afterwards. They don't want to risk an injury. Uh, Food was terrible. Sometimes it was burned. Other times it wasn't fully cooked. But it was as much psychological, though, as it was physical. When you're imprisoned, it's not just a matter of the absence of your freedom. I had to keep fighting off feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up, suicidal, ideation. Yeah, it was hard to get used to being in the cell. Sometimes I would try to sleep the time away when I was, in my cell. It took about 5 years to get used to that. Yeah, it was lonely. I mean, they put me in a prison that was 4.5 hours away from my home, so it made it more difficult to get visitors. You know, um, my mother used to come, once a month, but in the last 5 or 6 years, she came once every 6 months. I had several sets of aunts and uncles that would come and then disappear, and for 3 years and come and disappear. My brother, who's 3.5 years younger than I am, he came 3 times in the 16 years, not at all in the last decade. Most people didn't come to see me, so it was lonely as well.
So let me ask you, what kept you going?
A number of things at the same time. So, belief in God was one thing. Second thing was I thought I just had to hold on for a year or two till the next appeal was decided, which I was sure I was going to win because I was innocent and I still believe in the system. So I focused on that rather than focusing in on a 15 a life sentence, which I could not conceptualize doing 15 years in prison. Another thing is I used to go to the law library to learn the law, and that would give me a sense of comfort. I used to collect articles about other people who were exonerated, and that gave me motivation to keep going. I tried to find mental things to throw myself into, so I did a lot of educational programs that I did a lot of educational programs that they had. I read from 1998 to 2006. I read 3 or 4 nonfiction books a week. Usage of euphemisms, like I'm not going to my prison assignment in the morning and the prison assignment in the afternoon. I'm going to school or I'm going to work. It's the superintendent. It's not the prison warden. In 1998, Elmira allowed us to purchase televisions. And so while my TV mostly stayed off so I could do legal work and, write letters looking for help and reading nonfiction books, nonetheless, there were still some weekly programs that I used to watch. And the usage of delusion, the mind needs to survive. It creates things for us mentally. And so I wasn't going to school. Excuse me, I wasn't watching TV. I was visiting friends. I had that delusion like I was visiting friends. And when I would play basketball or ping pong or chess, I would pretend that I was a professional player and so were other people. But it wasn't like kids fooling around on the playground. This was that I needed to escape mentally. So that I would collect articles of nature scenes. And, there's like a physical box inside the cell where you're allowed to put pictures on the wall. And so I would put nature scenes there. And then there was another prisoner there named Frank Sterling who was innocent also. And every 6 weeks we would get together, and half the conversation would be about morale, and the other half the conversation would be what's the next tactic to engage in. By the way, Frank was exonerated by DNA testing a couple of years after I was. He survived 18 years, so it wasn't just that I was naively believing that he was innocent just because I happened to be, but he actually was. Lastly, a pen pal I showed up right in the nick of time. I had placed an ad in a newspaper called Sacramento Bee out in California. I was just desperate for contact with the outside, and of course, I had additional motivation. I hoped that at some point in a dialogue, the question would come around, well, what are you doing in there, by the way? And that would be my chance to try to explain, look, I'm innocent, here's my proof, and, hope that person could become like a champion for me and help to connect me to the legal and investigative help that I needed, because I had read that had happened in other cases. So none of his advice ever worked. He was over his head. So I ignored that part of it, and I just focused in on the content of the letter. I mean, I was asking a stranger that I didn't know from anywhere. Do you think I should just give up? Should I just commit suicide? I'm never going to get out of here. So all those things together. And lastly, I knew that nobody was coming to my rescue. I knew that from amongst the ranks of the people that I knew. So that meant I was going to have to go and try to recruit somebody. And to do that, I had to hold it together mentally to have a chance at that. So I didn't have the luxury of that. And last thing, less noble out of all the things that I mentioned, I was afraid, well, what if that doesn't go right either? What if now I'm paralyzed, now I break my neck, I'm in a wheelchair, or, what if I accumulate medications and take them and I don't die, but now I've managed to brain damage myself in some kind of way. Now I went from bad to worse. So that was another line of reasoning. So all those things were true at the same time. But nonetheless, I mean, I did have to keep fighting off those feelings. I mean, it was hard not to.
Question. What was the moment, if any, that you decided this is not going to define me? I'm not going to let this stop me, and I'm going to turn this into something good.
So that would be when I started, after I was exonerated and I started advocating. That took the form of I was speaking, I was trading privacy for awareness by doing media and ultimately new media interviews, meeting with elected officials. So I decided at that point, look, I need to think of myself as an advocate, just on the same par as anyone else. I never built in the excuse, well, yeah, but you were wrongfully imprisoned, they weren't, so you have to, but I always used other people as the yardstick, and that took the form of, again, just trying to be as, professional in my appearance, how I conduct myself, being on time, being well prepared, getting additional credentials. And when I didn't get into law school, I mean, after I got the bachelor's degree, because I had gotten GED associates in a year towards the bachelor's while I was in prison before funding was cut. So I got scholarship for Mercy College, and got finished the bachelor's. And when I didn't get into law school, I decided I'd get a master's degree and go to grad school. Hope the additional credential would make me better advocate. And when I finally got compensated, I started the organization. And again, I'm comparing myself to other founders and other people that are heads of nonprofit entities, particularly those that are working to free wrongfully convicted people. And at some point, I became not satisfied with sitting in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to sit at the defense table, make some of the arguments, represent the clients, hence going to law school and becoming an attorney.
So when did you have this idea that you can actually defend other people and become an attorney?
In my 14th year of imprisonment, I remember I was just sitting literally with the cell bars in front of me. I had this bucket they give you for hot water. I turned the thing upside down. I'm just sitting on it, looking at the cell bars, looking out the window. You could see little glimpses of outside world. And I remember thinking, man, if I get out of here, I'm going to become an attorney and I'm going to free other people in my position. But honestly, though, rather than that being something that I took realistic at the moment, it was more like it's at midnight and you in the cemetery and you're walking through the graveyard and you tell yourself you're not afraid. I mean, of course you are, and no, you're never gonna get out of here. But it was just that type of thought then was when it first happened. Then the thought occurred to me again after I got the bachelor's, but I didn't get into law school. And then at some point, into the nonprofit, I decided I would take another shot at that.
It's a big responsibility for someone so young. And I think it's very commendable because a lot of people in prison, they freeze and they just don't know what to do with themselves. And I think it's incredibly commendable that you were able to turn that into a positive, even while in prison. It didn't just start after you were exonerated.
That's true.
And
That is true. I mean, it's kind of amazing that I survived and then that I went down that path of, being proactive. Um, but I also want to say that, in terms of positive influences along the way, I, I got the right advice from the right people along the way. There was no one that really kind of followed me in a cohort type fashion. It was when I first got to prison, one old timer suggested, hey, you need to go to the law library. I have a paid attorney and I don't trust the paid attorney to defend me. I go to the law library so I can be in better position to give suggestions, ideas, and to review work done on my part. You're in a worse position than me because you don't have a paid attorney. So if I'm going to the law library, you better go. Another person suggested to me, why don't you, you should, don't waste your time. Don't be like a janitor. They call them a porter. Do educational programs, get your GED. Go to, the person suggested, go to college. One of the prisoners who was a librarian, after a year of me going to the general library, borrowing all these fiction and fantasy books, said, look, I get it. Your mind leaves here for a few hours, and it's something positive. But you could do the same thing if you learn nonfiction books. If you read nonfiction, you learn something at same. So I got some advice from people along the way, and I guess I was fortunate to have the foresight to listen to that, and it all came out okay for me. But even just a similar dynamic when I got out from somebody who an editor who started a newspaper, not the founder, but the editor, and giving me the chance to. He started out just interviewing me as the subject of an article, but ended up inviting me to write a column for pay, and I became a columnist there. And then the dean of Mercy College, who lined a scholarship up for me that didn't, without even, well, before she even asked me, and then a judge that gave me advice, why don't you just go to law school and get the credential? You know these topics better than lawyers and some judges. That's why you're here speaking to us. So I guess I've got the right advice from the right people at the right time. They all played the very limited role. It was just for that one thing in my life, but it was what I needed at the right time. And again, I was fortunate enough to listen to the advice.
Before we go into the amazing work that you are doing now, I would like to ask you, if you're looking back, do you think, or at what level did what forgiveness played in your life?
So I don't know that I've ever reached a point of forgiveness. It's more that the first week I was home, I was definitely, angry for sure. But then, I remember when I was what turned out to be within my last couple of months of prison, I saw somebody else had been exonerated in New York that had actually left Sing Sing, Alan Newman, who was exonerated after 21 years in prison. And in his press conference, he was asked if he was angry, and he said he wasn't angry. And frankly, I thought to myself, well, this is the silliest thing ever. Of course, you're angry. That's stupid to say that. So I was angry. In fact, my interview, they asked me if I was angry, and I asked her, I threw the question back at the reporter. I said, well, look, I just was in prison for 16 years. I lost all these different things, and I itemized everything. And I said, well, would you be angry? But at the end of that week, I realized that, the anger was destroying me, and I realized I needed to let it go. And actually, I was the one who was silly. He had the right idea. So my lines of reasoning were, with that, look, I want to enjoy my life as much as I can. I can't do that if I'm angry and bitter. I've lost so much already as is. Why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? It's not like I would be adversely affecting people involved in what happened if I was angry. I mean, I would really be the only loser in that scenario. And the vehicle that allows me to actualize that is I take that energy that I feel and I channel it into the advocacy work. So I think it's a matter of not being angry rather than forgiveness, although the two concepts are very closely related. And I want to add that, doing advocacy work, it's healing, it's cathartic, it makes a difference. I need my suffering to count for something. And that's my silver lining. And I am a reflective person. I am thoughtful, and I hope that I'm making my legacy as I go along. Just for posterity.
Yes, definitely.
100%. Yeah.
So now please tell us what amazing work you are doing. We can't wait to hear your latest success.
Sure. So in terms of policy work, and then I'm going to get to the latest. I want to just shed a little background. So policy-wise in New York, we're advocating policy changes. False confessions have caused wrongful convictions. 29% of the GNA proven wrongful convictions. So we're advocating for that law enforcement has to record all interrogations. Current law mandates they record custodial interrogations. They have exceptions for homicides, sex offenses, drug cases. So we want to get rid of the exceptions. Record all the time. Let's be clear. If there's any threats, if there's coercion, are there hints or details being given? Or look, is an allegation of coercion false and the police officer did not do that? It is a proper interrogation. Youth Interrogation Act, which would give 16, 17-year-olds and kids younger a non-waivable right to counsel. They would have to have an attorney speak to them to explain their rights before they could decide to waive them. Most kids don't understand their rights. I mean, I never did when they read me my Miranda warnings when it comes to where it says anything you say can and will be used against you in court of law. My mind went to what I saw on TV. And I, think about different civil court contexts, and I think court, what do you mean? We're not going to court. Banning police from lying to suspects in interrogation, called Police Deception Bill. Pennsylvania, border state to New York, one of 12 states that does not compensate people when they're exonerated. Working on that. In California, we're pushing the passage of Commission on Prosecutor Conduct, so independent oversight board that can investigate allegations of prosecutorial misconduct. That would mirror the landmark bill that we were able to pass in New York, and we hope the rest of the country would follow. In terms of cases, overall, Foundation has freed 14 people. A couple of years ago, had my first success as a lawyer. Was co-counsel, lead attorney Oscar Michelin, and we overturned Andre Brown's wrongful conviction. He did 23 years. Decision came out in December, a couple of weeks away from Christmas. So Andre had a great Christmas gift, as did his wife and the son and his daughter. So since then, I've been co-counsel in 9 cases. Some of them are cases that got started that predated my law license. I've entered as co-counsel, and others are new cases. Most of the time, I'm second seating, but there's a few cases where I'm the lead attorney as well, just for the experience. So, as it happened, yesterday we had another success. Had my first exoneration as an attorney, and along with a partner law firm, we were able to exonerate Thomas Schaefer. In short, Mr. Schaefer had been wrongfully convicted of 4th-degree grand larceny. He was convicted of stealing his mother's engagement ring. That ring was valued at approximately $1,600. He did steal some other rings that was just costume jewelry, artificial gems. The key thing being he didn't steal the expensive ring, and that ring is what made it to be a felony instead of what he should have been charged with, just a disorderly conduct and likely get community service. Instead, he ended up with a felony on his record, and he had a 5-year probation sentence, of which he served 2 years. So the mother found the ring a couple of months after he had been arrested. She did not understand the significance of that, so she only reported it like a year ago. Actually, she didn't understand that the value of that ring is what made everything a felony. Meanwhile, Mr. Schaefer had turned his life around. He moved to another state. He became a preacher. He got a bachelor's degree in business administration with 3.73 GPA. He worked at a agency. He was running this agency that was helping people recover from addictions, and then he was working at present at an engineering firm, but he wanted to get a license, to be land surveyor, and having the felony conviction was a significant obstacle to that. Hence his interest in, still getting this felony off his record, and how we thought it would make a difference. And so, we were able to present the evidence to the court. We got the special prosecutor in the case, Mr. Schrader. He consented to the exoneration. He carefully reviewed everything. The judge went on board also. So Mr. Schaefer's thrilled to have been exonerated of that felony, get it off his record. He's looking forward to voting as well and not having the stigma of a felony on his record. So these are the moments that we live for. That was what the dream was. I mean, as you know, Andrea, the law school is the route to law school graduation and passing the bar and the other exams that we have to is long and hard. But moments like this make it all worth it.
Worth it. Yes. Thank you so much. So just tell our listeners where people can find you and how can they get in contact with you.
Sure. So first and foremost, our website, www.deskovic.org. That's DESKOVIC.org. Then also, Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation has a Facebook page. I have a Facebook page as well, Jeffrey Deskovic. I have my personal page, my public profile page. Is too many people follow me, so I copy from one over to the other. It's not different content. On Instagram, Deskovic Foundation. I'm on LinkedIn as well. You know, my dream is I would like to ultimately have a chapter of the foundation in each state and ultimately each country. I really see this as a worldwide issue in countries where we're not hearing about wrongful conviction, not hearing about people exonerated is because nobody's digging, nobody's looking, nobody's working on the cases, nobody's being exonerated. You know, but that of course will be when we get the public financial support that we need. To that extent, you know, we do have a crowdfunding page on the website Patreon, which is for people willing to be recurring monthly donors. Just type Patreon, Patreon, and Deskovic Foundation in the search bar. The page will come up. Dream with me for a second. You know, what if there were 25,000 people willing to donate $3 to $5 or whatever amount they can afford on a recurring monthly basis? That would give us close to $1 million, and we could work on freeing more people. We could hire additional attorneys, paralegals, investigators, other essential personnel. You know, if you work at a corporation and they do corporate philanthropy, please just put us on their radar. If know people that are members of the media or have podcasts, or you know, that could be the connection of people that have capacity. I just want to be able to. My biggest challenge is, you know, I kind of arrived at the socioeconomic status that I did somewhat artificially, just by means of the lawsuit, as opposed to making it in business 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Now I have a cachet of people that made it with me I could turn back to. So I need third parties who can introduce me to people of capacity that this cause may speak to. You know, and it's a soft sell. Here's who I am. Here's my credentials. Here's my body of work. Here's what the organization has accomplished. Here's the metrics we could meet if, you know, we were able to get to what our budgetary needs are. You know, is this a cause that, you know, speaks to you or not? And just be appreciative of people's, you know, time just to consider. So if you're out there, if you're listening, those are ways you could get in, you can get involved. If you work in the field that has an application of your skill within the context of a nonprofit, you know, we certainly do accept, you know, people to, you know, volunteer and help us with one thing, with one thing or another. But I'm free. I'm out. I doubt very seriously I'd ever be wrongfully convicted. I'm an attorney now. I have resources to fight back. I know the system. So this isn't about me. This is about the men and women that I, you know, that I metaphorically, you know, left behind.
This is an incredible story, and what you're doing to help other people is even more extraordinary. And now, before we leave, I want to ask you for a piece of advice or wisdom for people that fight injustice. What would you tell them?
Have a goal, which is, you know, whatever, you know, you're fighting injustice, overcoming whatever aspect of injustice you're experiencing personally or that you're fighting against on behalf of everybody, right? Have a goal, have a realistic plan. You know, you should be able to look at the plan 3 or 4 different ways and say to yourself, yes, I see how this might work. Because who wants to carry a plan out that you don't think can work? 3, be flexible. Remember, the goal is the goal. The plan is not the goal. The plan is just to how to get there. So if you have to modify the plan a little bit to then you know, then you do that. Don't be afraid of hard work. You know, I'm not a pie in the sky person. I don't think everything's going to be okay just because. You know, I think that if you work really, you have to work really hard to put yourself in a position for a miracle to happen, or put yourself in a position for a door to open. No excuses. You know, there might be reasons why something is harder, sure, but you just have to want it enough. You just have to work hard. You just have to work hard enough. And lastly, never ever give up. You know, and when you reach a point where you can't go on anymore, you know, you just know that you might be at the key juncture right there. You might be on the verge of a breakthrough. So even though you can't go on anymore, you have to do it anyway to see what happens on the other side. And when you cross that bridge and you get there, you have to reach back and help people in the same position that you were in. That would be my advice. The universal formula I've come up with on reflecting on, my life's journey to date.
Yes. And my experience taught me that things happen for a reason.
Yes.
I would not have changed and found the peace with my life if that experience did not happen. So I am blessed for the people that are in my life and where I got right at this point in my life. And I feel blessed that I had the mental power to move forward and now to give back, as you said. And I would like to end here to thank you so very much for being here with us today and wish you best of luck in everything that you are doing. It's amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for your questions. And if people like what they've heard here and they would like to see some more, I do want to share there is a documentary short out about me, which is on Amazon Prime, called Conviction. There are a few different works by that name. Obviously, the one pertaining to me will have my picture on it.
We'll look for it now, actually, and we'll put
Yes.
all of that information in the description as well, so other people can find it. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. So inspirational.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, here he left it.